The laughter hit her before the elevator doors finished opening. It wasn't the polite kind. It wasn't even the uncomfortable kind that people disguise as coughing. It was full, open, room-filling laughter, the kind that happens when a group of people have decided together that something is funny, and that something was her. Amara Ose Bonsu stepped off the elevator onto the 38th floor of Caldwell and Harwick Capital Management and stood very still, while 6 people in expensive suits looked at her, the way you look at a stray cat that has somehow wandered into a members-only dining room. She was 29 years old. She was wearing a navy blazer. She had pressed herself at 6 that morning. She was carrying a leather portfolio her grandmother had given her when she graduated from Wharton, and she had not slept more than 4 hours because she had been reviewing the Hendricks-Paulton acquisition files until 2 in the morning. None of that was visible to the people laughing. What was visible was that she was young, that she was black, that she was standing in a hallway where people who looked like her did not typically stand unless they were pushing a mail cart or refilling the coffee station by the east windows. "Can I help you?" The man who said it was not actually asking. His name was Prescott Dunmore, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions, 26 years at the firm. The kind of man who had a parking spot with his name on a placard and considered that placard a form of identity. He was tall, silver-haired, and he was smiling in the way that people smile when they believe they already know the ending of the conversation they are about to have. Amara looked at him. She didn't look away. "I have a 9 o'clock, she said. "With who?" He said it without the question mark. The grammatically correct version would have been with whom, but Prescott Dunmore had not bothered with that level of precision because he did not yet consider this a real conversation. "The executive committee," Amara said. The laughter that followed was quietless, more private. The kind that circulates through a room in glances and small smiles rather than open sound. A woman near the window, whose name Amara did not yet know but would later learn was Vanessa Brock, head of client relations, turned slightly toward her colleague and pressed her lips together. The colleague, a man in his 40s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, shook his head almost imperceptibly. Prescott Dunmore took one slow step forward. "Sweetheart," he said, "the executive committee meets on 38. "This is 38. "I know," Amara said. "That's why I pressed 38. He blinked. Not because he was processing what she said. It was a simple sentence, but because he had not expected her to respond at all, or at least not like that, not without some visible sign of apology or retreat. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amara Osi Bonsu." He waited, the way people wait when they expect a title to follow. Assistant to, associate under, intern from. Nothing followed. "And you work here?" Vanessa Brock asked from near the window. Her tone was careful, which was its own kind of unkind. "I do," Amara said. "In what capacity?" Prescott said. Amara set her portfolio down on the long credenza that ran along the near wall. She opened it. She removed a single sheet of paper, cream-colored, heavy stock, the kind that has a watermark you can only see when you hold it up to light, and she placed it on the credenza, without offering it to anyone, without explaining it, without saying anything at all. Then she picked up her portfolio again and waited. No one moved toward the paper. No one wanted to be the first to look, because looking would mean they were uncertain, and none of them were willing to admit uncertainty. "Not yet." "Listen," Prescott said, his voice dropping into the register men use when they want to sound reasonable rather than threatened. "I don't know what the mix-up is, but this floor is restricted access. There's a badge requirement. You'd know that if I badged in," Amara said. "That's not possible," he said. "And yet," she said. The sentence sat in the room like something dropped from a height. Vanessa Brock uncrossed her arms. She was looking at the paper on the credenza. She hadn't walked toward it, but her eyes had moved there twice now, and the second time they stayed longer. Prescott took another step forward, this one less certain than the last. He glanced at the paper himself, then looked back at Amara. "This is not a place for—" He stopped. "For what?" Amara asked. He didn't answer. She had been in rooms like this her entire career. Not this building specifically, but rooms like it. Rooms where the air changed when she entered, where the silence had a specific texture, where people asked her questions they would not have asked the man standing next to her. She had learned, through years of practice, and through a particular clarity of purpose she had developed somewhere around age 24, that the only language these rooms actually understood was patience and precision. Not anger, not explanation. Those only gave people something to respond to, something to dismiss. Patience and precision were harder to argue with. You could dismiss a person. It was more difficult to dismiss a woman who simply stood there, unmoved, holding everything she needed and offering none of it until the moment she chose to. She had chosen her moment. She was still choosing it. The elevator doors opened again. The man who stepped off was named Elliot Cross, and he was the chairman of Caldwell and Harwick Capital Management. He was 71 years old. He wore a watch that cost more than most people's cars, and he had founded the firm in 1989 with his college roommate and $40,000 in seed capital. He was not a large man physically, but he had the particular presence of someone who had never, in living memory, walked into a room and been anything other than its most important occupant. He stopped. He looked at Amara, and then something happened on his face that was very small and very significant, a softening around the eyes, a slight shift in the set of his mouth, and he said, in a voice that did not require the room's attention because it already had it, "You're here, I'm here," Amara said. Elliot Cross walked past Prescott Dunmore without looking at him. He extended his hand to Amara, and she shook it, and he held the handshake for a half-second longer than usual, which is a thing people do when they mean it. "Was there a problem?" he asked, still not looking at Prescott. "No," Amara said. "Good." He turned toward the conference room at the end of the hall. "The others are waiting. I told them 9 sharp and it's now." He checked his watch. 8:57, so we're actually early. He began walking. Amara picked up her portfolio from where she'd set it on the credenza. She picked up the cream-colored paper as well, sliding it back into its sleeve, unhurried. She had not looked at Prescott Dunmore since Elliot Cross stepped off the elevator. She didn't look at him now. She simply walked. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the skyline, and it was the kind of room that was designed to make people feel the weight of decisions. 12 chairs around an oval table. Water glasses already filled. A presentation screen at the far end, already on, showing the firm's logo. 7 people stood when Amara entered, which is not something that happens in those rooms, unless the person walking in matters. Elliot Cross went to his seat at the head of the table. He gestured to the chair immediately to his right. "Everyone," he said, "I'd like you to formally meet Amara Osei-Bonsu." He paused. Not for effect. He was not the kind of man who paused for effect. He paused because the next sentence was one he had been thinking about for several months, and he wanted to say it correctly. Effective the 1st of the month, Amara will be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer of this firm. The room did not make a sound. The kind of silence that followed was not the absence of noise. It was the presence of a great many thoughts that no one was certain were safe to say aloud. Amara sat down. She set her portfolio on the table and opened it to the first tabbed section. The restructuring proposal she had been building for 14 months, through 2 prior firms and 1 very long year of working quietly and specifically toward a single point. She did not open the meeting. She did not make a speech. She uncapped a pen, a simple one, a Pilot G2, the same pen she had used since college, unremarkable, unpretentious, and she made a small note in the margin of the first page. Then she looked up. "I'd like to start with the Hendricks-Paulton files," she said. "Specifically the clause on page 44 that I think we need to renegotiate before this closes." "Does everyone have their copy?" They did. The meeting ran for 3 hours and 20 minutes, which was unusual, and no one asked to leave, which was more unusual. At various points, people around the table leaned forward. At one point, a man named Carol Whitfield, who had been at the firm for 17 years and was known for his composure, sat back in his chair and said, quietly, to no one in particular, "I'll be damned." He said it like a compliment. He meant it as one. Prescott Dunmore was still on the 38th floor when the meeting ended. This was not technically where he needed to be. His office was on 34, but he had not gone back to 34 because some part of him had required the confirmation of seeing the conference room door open again. He was standing near the credenza, on the pretense of reviewing something on his phone, when the door opened and people began filtering out. He watched Carol Whitfield stop and shake Amara's hand. He watched two other senior partners do the same. He watched Elliot Cross say something to her quietly, to which she nodded once. Then Amara walked out into the hall and she and Prescott were for a moment in proximity. He said her name. "Mrs. Osei-Bonsu?" She looked at him. There is a particular experience that comes with being a person who has spent decades certain of his position, his authority, his permanent place in a room, and then watching that certainty rearrange itself in the span of a morning. Prescott was experiencing that now. His face had a quality she recognized because she had seen it before, on other men in other rooms, and it was not a look of malice. Malice had already been there earlier and had since burned off. What remained was something rawer, more human and less flattering. It was embarrassment looking for a shape to take. "I wanted to," he started. "You don't have to," Amara said. Not unkindly. She wasn't interested in his discomfort, which was different from having caused it. "We have a 9 o'clock Thursday. I'll see you then." She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. She waited. What Prescott Dunmore did not know, and would not learn until the following week when the HR review was complete, was that the board investigation into the 38th floor conduct, an investigation that had actually begun 6 weeks earlier, stemming from a formal complaint by a junior analyst who had left the firm rather than continue to endure a working environment she described, in writing, as hostile, had quietly documented more than 2 years' worth of incidents. Exclusion of certain employees from key meetings, the casual cruelty of nicknames, the kinds of comments that don't individually constitute a firing, but that, assembled in a document and reviewed in totality, becomes something that a firm's incoming CEO might look at very seriously. The review was completed on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, Prescott Dunmore was placed on administrative leave. On Thursday, the 9 o'clock meeting proceeded without him. Vanessa Brock attended. She sat across from Amara and she was professional. And she was careful and she was prepared, in the way that people are prepared when they have done a great deal of thinking overnight. She had a notepad. She had questions. She did not once glance at the door, which was its own statement. Amara noticed. She did not remark on it. There was a moment, about 40 minutes into the meeting, when Vanessa paused before answering a question about the client retention numbers from Q3 and said, slightly too carefully, "I want to be straightforward with you." "Good," Amara said. "That's what I need from this team." Vanessa nodded. They kept working. 3 months later, the Hendricks-Paulton acquisition closed, at a number that was 8% higher than the firm's previous best. The restructuring proposal, the one Amara had been building for 14 months, the one she had opened to page 1 on her first morning in that conference room, had been implemented in phases. And the third phase was just now becoming visible in the numbers. Elliot Cross called her on a Friday afternoon. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "Okay," she said. "I've been doing this for 35 years, he said, "and I have had, in that time, possibly 4 conversations that I walked away from certain I was in the presence of someone who was going to change something. I want you to know that the first conversation I had with you was one of them." Amara was in her office on the 38th floor, the same windows, looking out over the same skyline. She was holding the G2 pen she had been using since the day she graduated, and she was looking at the line she had just written on the notepad. In front of her she said, "Roped. Thank you, Elliot." She meant it. She set the pen down and looked out at the city. It was a clear day, the kind of day where you can see farther than usual, where the horizon is not a limit but just another place you haven't gotten to yet. She had a 2 o'clock. She picked up the pen. She got back to work.